Welcome back to Mimi's Organic Eats. Today we're going to be making my all butter pie crust recipe, and I'm going to share some of my top tips and tricks for making the best buttery and flaky pie crust. So you guys only need a couple simple ingredients to make your own butter pie crust at home, and it's going to be so much better than anything you would buy at the store. The first thing you're going to need for an all butter pie crust is, of course, butter. You make sure you're using a high quality butter that you like. I really love Organic Valley salted butter. I use it for everything, so I'm using it for this pie crust as well. You can use salted or unsalted if you prefer. I am a true believer of using salted butter for everything, so I just think it makes it easier. But if you're using unsalted butter, you may just want to add about a quarter teaspoon of salt to this recipe. Then you're going to need some fresh flour. I really love Karen Spring Mill's flour. It's one of my all-time favorites. Their flour tastes amazing and it's fresh milled, so I know I'm getting a really good high quality flour. And then you're just gonna need a little bit of cane sugar and some cold water. And that's it. That's all you guys need to make butter pie crust at home. And now you can make this all butter pie crust with a stand mixer, or you can do it by hand. Either way works. But I am kind of a lazy baker, and so if I can save any time at all, I will use my stand mixer. And so I can tell you guys that you will save time and it will be faster if you use your stand mixer. But if you don't have a stand mixer, you can also do this by hand. I used to do it all the time before I had one myself. The process is going to be basically the same. It's just going to be either using your stand mixer with the paddle attachment or just using your hands. So just a few tips before we get started. You want to make sure that you're using a digital food scale to measure your flour. That is going to be super important. That way you'll get the most accurate measurements. And then next, you want to make sure that your butter is cold straight from the fridge. This is super important. While unlike with cookies, you want butter to be soft because you want it to mix into the sugar and into the dough, with pie crust, you don't actually want that butter to mix into the flour completely because that will create little holes in the dough. In cookies, this is actually bad, but in pie crust, this is what creates that buttery and flaky pie crust. And so when you're making pie dough, you want to work quickly because every second that this butter is out of the fridge, it's becoming warmer and warmer. And so if you are new to making pie dough, or maybe you're a little bit slower in the kitchen, or you have what we call hot hands, which is basically like you touch the butter and the butter just like starts to melt. I've had a few employees at my bake shop that had hot hands, and it was difficult for them to make pie dough. So any of those things, you actually want to chop your butter beforehand, put it in a mixing bowl, throw it in the fridge, leave it in there for like 15 minutes before you make your pie dough. This will ensure that your butter is actually cold. And so you don't have to do that, but if you notice that your butter is warming as you're chopping it, or it's been sitting out, then you definitely want to do that to ensure you get the most buttery and flaky pie crust. And so this recipe for my all butter pie crust will make a double crust. That means you get a bottom crust and a top crust, which is most classic for apple pie, cherry pie, blueberry pie, anything that has that bottom crust and then it's also covered on the top. You can use this also if you want to lattice the top of the pie. As long as it has a bottom crust and a top crust, you can do any sort of decoration you want. You can also use this pie crust recipe to make 2 galettes. And you can even use this pie crust recipe to make about 6 mini pies. It all just depends how you divide up the dough once it's made, and I'll go over that at the end as well. So once you're ready to start making your all butter pie crust, you want to measure out 227 grams of all-purpose flour using a digital food scale. And I just have that in a bowl here. Next, you want to measure out 1 teaspoon of cane sugar and then have 7 tablespoons of cold water ready. You want to do your butter last, like I said. So then you're going to need 170 grams of salted butter, which is 1.5 sticks if you're using Organic Valley butter. And now you want to chop this into small cubes. And I like to chop the butter in half. And then I like to cut each half at least in half again, but sometimes even in 3s. Then you'll end up with little sticks like this, and then we're just going to chop these into cubes from there. So now you have your butter all chopped up into small cubes. And this doesn't have to be perfect, you just want them to be small little cubes. And if you notice that your butter is sticking and melting all over your hands, just put it in a bowl, pop it in the fridge for about 15 minutes, and then come back to this. So the first step is going to be to add in your 227 grams of all-purpose flour to your mixing bowl. And then next, add in 1 teaspoon of cane sugar. And now I'm using my stand mixer because I told you I use it all the time, also because I'm lazy. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can just use a large mixing bowl and use your hands. You don't want to use a hand mixer for pie dough because those have beaters. That's a little bit different than the paddle attachment, and when you don't want to cream the butter, it's really not ideal. So you want to use your stand mixer with the paddle attachment or just use your hands. So once you have your flour and your cane sugar in the mixing bowl, we're just going to mix for a couple rotations just to combine the sugar into the flour. If you're doing this by hand, you can also just mix this up with your hands. That's it, super easy. Now we're going to add our butter into our mixing bowl. Once you have everything in your mixing bowl, we're gonna mix this on low until it looks like wet sand. What that means is we want the flour to kind of coat the butter, and we want some of the butter chunks to break up just a little bit, but not really that much. Once it's at that point, then we're going to add in all of the 7 tablespoons of cold water at one time and let it continue to mix just until combined. You don't want to overmix pie dough. And if you're doing this by hand, all you're going to do is mix the butter and flour together with your hands, just like this. And then as soon as it's ready, pour in your water and continue to do that. It will get kind of sticky if you're mixing it by hand, which is one of the reasons why I love using my stand mixer for this. If you have kitchen gloves, that would be a great thing to put on if you're doing this by hand. So as you can see, I stopped this before it was completely mixed. There's still like some little bits of butter and maybe a couple dry parts of flour, and that's totally okay. You just want to finish this by hand. And you can just finish this by hand just by giving it a little mix, just like this. Once your pie dough is done mixing, it's time to portion it out, wrap it up in plastic wrap, and then it'll chill in the fridge for at least 4 hours or ideally overnight. Then it's time to divide up the dough however you need to use it. So this dough will make one double crust, which is going to be a bottom and a top pie crust. If you're going to do this, you're going to weigh the bottom out to be 312 grams and the top out to be 170 grams. Then you're going to get 2 pieces of plastic wrap, form the dough into a disc, and wrap them up. If you want to do 2 galettes or 2 bottom-only pie crusts, and a bottom-only pie crust would be something like a pecan pie or a pumpkin pie, then you're just going to divide the dough in half, which is going to be about 250 grams each, form that into a disc, wrap them up in plastic wrap. And last, if you want to make mini pies or mini galettes, you can get about 6 mini galettes out of this dough, and you'll just want to divide the dough into about 83 grams each and wrap each one in plastic wrap as well. So today, I'm actually making 2 galettes, so I'm just going to divide the dough in half, form into discs, and wrap in my plastic wrap that I have ready here. And now the idea of forming it into a disc is just really to make it easier for you to roll out. This is going to allow the pie dough to come down to room temperature at a nice pace also and be flat enough for you to start rolling it out with ease. This is why we don't want to just leave a ball of pie dough in the fridge because you won't be able to roll it out as easily, and by the time it comes down to temperature where you can press down and roll it out, the butter will be too soft and it won't really result in a buttery flaky pie crust because remember I said you want to have cold butter for a buttery flaky pie crust. So this also goes for when you roll out your pie as well. And now if you're making a galette or a tart, you don't have to form it into a circle. You could actually form one of these into a square if you want, if you're doing a square galette, or a rectangle if you're making a rectangle galette. So I'm gonna do this one in a square. Then once your pie dough is formed into the shapes and sizes that you need, time to wrap it up tightly in plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out. Now it's time to put your pie dough in the fridge, and it needs to chill in the fridge for at least 4 hours, or overnight is always best. And if you want to freeze pie dough, you can freeze it just like this, wrapped in the plastic wrap. In order to thaw it, just put it in the fridge for 24 hours and then make sure to roll it out right at that time. If you want more baking tips and tricks, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join me next time in the kitchen. Happy pie baking!